Good morning, Internet. Happy Friday. We've made it to the end of the week. So, today I wanted to talk about, sort of just briefly, something I've been thinking about a fair amount, and that is the sort of the intersection of two ideas. One is the idea, sort of, when you're in the space of LTC, learning to code, you may very well experience a phenomenon, which is the more you learn, the more you realize, the less you know. This is pretty common. We could Google the actual saying, but it's sort of the idea that like the more knowledge that you acquire, the more knowledge that you sort of have in order to put in perspective how much of the world or how much of LTC learning to code or how much just technical knowledge you lack. And that sort of feeling can be both really intense and somewhat intimidating, at least in my experience. So if you take that idea, the more you learn, the less you know, and then you sort of juxtaposition or superimpose that onto a second idea, which is sort of the longer time that you take to learn to code, depending on your path in LTC learning to code, sort of the less financially not stable you are, but like the more money that you've invested or put into the process of learning to code. And I think I probably have somewhat of a bias, if not an acute bias or multiple biases for this space. But I was just sort of thinking about this question in the context of I'm in a boot camp, I paid tuition dollars every day. I'm not working while I'm in this boot camp, so like full time in the boot camp, not earning any money. So there's the opportunity cost of like foregone earnings, and then there's just the fact that like I'm spending my savings or some portion of my savings, right? And you could dig into that. It's relatively complex, and maybe it's just dumb or frustrating or pretentious to say that, because obviously not everyone has savings that they can utilize in their journey of LTC. Not everyone obviously is going to do a boot camp. Not everyone should do a boot camp. So there, I almost sort of hesitate to make this video in that it might not be wildly or broadly applicable to the audience or audiences of our community. But I think it is interesting, just sort of in the idea of LTC, learning to code, having sort of this awareness of the more that you learn, particularly when you're on the beginning of your journey, the more aware you might be of what everything you could learn, or all the things you might feel like you need to learn in order to be competent in whatever role you want, whether it's a dev or tech lead or even just like a marketing salesperson with technical knowledge. There's just like so much that you could learn, right? And maybe there's some subset of the things that you should learn, and then another subset of the things that it would be nice to learn, right? And so there's a lot of variance, I imagine, within this, but just sometimes it really hits home and really settles with me. It's just sort of like the vast space, whether that be different programming languages, whether that could be different mastery of different programming languages, whether that could be mastery of concepts, whether that could be web dev, whether that could be like statistics within programming. I guess if you think of data science and programming as related or similar, there's like machine learning. I just like throw in some keywords here, but there's just like so much, right? And obviously, I think a lot of people choose to specialize just for that very reason, so that they can try to add and bring value to a project with some level of concentrated knowledge. But sometimes it's just crazy to think about. On the flip side, I actually find that really, really exciting, and I feel really blessed and grateful. I'm not religious per se, but like I just feel like deeply excited and grateful and happy that I've sort of found a space, LTC, where there's this lifelong learning curve. There's a steep learning curves in different sort of heights and intensities, but like it's just so cool to think about how for much of my life, if I choose to, I could just keep learning things within the sort of the focus area of LTC, learning to code, or just code in general, and how sort of, at least to some degree, these concepts or packages might stack upon each other, build upon each other. And we've mentioned that in other videos. So that, I think, is the cool part of realizing how much there is to potentially learn, or how much you don't know. So that can be exciting. But sort of the thesis of this video was just to look at the concept of the phenomenon, the potential feelings, internally or externally, of like, the more you know, the more you know how much there is to potentially learn, or that you should learn. And then just over here, to my left, your right, is the idea of like your financial situation. And at least for me, like taking some time to like fully focus, or try to fully focus on programming, don't know why I'm saying it like that, means that like my financial resources or capacity or ability is like going down, and sort of like the amount that I don't know is going up. So there's like the delta is becoming notably larger and larger. But you can use a lot of different psychological tools to sort of help mitigate or combat that. Like one of the things, sorry to laugh like this, I find it funny because I don't know if it's true, but one of the things that I say to sort of comfort myself as a débutant, a beginner, is that like, at least currently in many societies, programming, or some level of programming, whether it's whitewashed or not, I don't know, is a valuable skill, and the future compensation or future recompensation could come from the time I'm investing now, and the money that I'm investing now to learn to code. So that's one little strategy I use. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pro and anti comments. Pro and anti comments, I'm not sure is the thing, but maybe you get what I'm saying. Like a lot of heated discussion about whether or not that's true. Because I think there's this really interesting phenomenon, not to digress too much, but there's this really interesting phenomenon between the different learning paths within LTC, learning to code, and some of the more traditional learning paths, like undergrad CS degree, experience at a proper dev shop or engineering driven organization. So it may look down on other approaches, which no real comment there, but some of us, I guess I'll just speak for myself, I didn't think to major in computer science. Thought it wasn't possible for me, wouldn't be possible, and I didn't think to try to apply to Google or Slack or Facebook or whatever as an engineer, particularly with no engineering background. So most people have different paths, or there's a variety of paths you can have, and I accept that. You can take what you want from that, believe what you want. Alright, so in summary, this video is supposed to be about the juxtaposition between two ideas. Idea one being the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, particularly in how that applies to learning to code, or the journey thereof. The second idea was sort of, depending on how you approach learning to code, there can be this financial phenomenon where your savings go down and down and down. For me, this is like investing in bootcamp tuition and living costs, but for others it could just be like, well, you're continually buying books and courses on Udemy or LinkedIn Learning, and there's like some financial cost, at least a lot of the time. And if there's no financial cost, there's temporal cost. So sort of similar thing, perhaps. And if you mash up these two ideas, there's this sort of this interesting dynamic, and for me, like the apparent increasing delta is sort of an interesting thing to think about, just at least, in the very least, because it evokes an emotional response within me. Alright, so that's all good and done, but what we really want to know is what you think, particularly what you think about this topic. Is it interesting to you? Do you have any personal inclinations? Do you think everything we're saying is BS rather than CS, wrong letter? Does any of this resonate with you? Do you find that there's a financial cost in learning to code? If so, yes. If not, why? Some combination of that. We also sort of just like want to know, do you also experience this sort of tension between like the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know? And then sort of in a separate branch, because, you know, thinking about Git and branching and origin master and stuff. Sorry, I digress again. On a different branch, we just sort of want to know what you think about the video, the production level, what we could do better, what we're doing well, if anything. That kind of feedback is always valued and appreciated. So, alright, it's Friday. I'm going to run to class, or walk to class, or skip to class, or roll to class. Somehow I'm going to get to class. Hopefully we'll be around tonight for a video. If not, join us this weekend. And yeah, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Really enjoy engaging with the community, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay, bye.